Here's how I think we're going to work this. I'm going to just talk for a minute or two about myself, about where I'm from, how I got to here, and then I'm going to sort of throw it open for questions that people may have about me, about the church, about where we're at, what's happening, all that stuff. Would love to have a chance to hear from you. I will answer what I can, and those things which I have not yet learned, I will file away and get back to you on. So does that sound good, everybody? Excellent. All right, so, as you all know, I'm Noah. I am from, originally, the Boston area. I grew up outside of Boston in one of the western suburbs of Boston called Newton, where my parents still live. They were here this past week. Some of you got to meet them. They came down for a visit, which was lovely. I grew up there and had these twin passions growing up of athletics, of sports, and singing, of music. So, from as early as I can remember, I was doing theater and sports, whether it was basketball, baseball, swimming, soccer, football, lacrosse, all of those at one point or another. And started getting on the stage at a very young age. I didn't think this was a weird combination. It only was later in life that someone told me this was strange, that someone loved these two things, and then was free to pursue them. And some people in college took great interest in the football-playing opera singer, but that was my 15 minutes of fame. Anyways, I grew up there in Newton. I have two parents, one younger brother, who is now married with two young girls of his own, and they live up in the Boston area as well. So that is and still remains sort of home base for the Van Niel clan. I went to college at Harvard University and did my 4 years of undergrad there. Played football while I was there. Loved that. At that time, it was really what I was all about. But as I went on through my years, I got to start my last 2 years, at junior and senior year, at fullback. So people have been asking me my position. I was a fullback. But realized pretty early on I was not going to go to the NFL. So I was too slow, too small, too weak, too most things. And I both increased my sort of study of voice and sort of refocused myself a little bit more intensely on my academics. You could say I was a late bloomer in that regard. But ended up majoring in English literature there, and had some truly wonderful teachers in a really stellar department that allowed me to exercise, analytical thinking and creative thinking and expressing myself in ways, or thinking with texts and authors and people. That was a great delight for me. So sort of the intellectual component, the athletic component, and then the musical component. After college, towards the end of college, again, knew the NFL was not in my future, so decided, with the encouragement of some teachers and some mentors, to pursue advanced study in opera singing, in training. Applied to a number of schools where they have masters in voice, and I ended up at a small, very good, very small school in Philadelphia called the Academy of Vocal Arts. Those of you who know Philly, it's right off of Rittenhouse Square in the sort of southwestern quadrant of downtown. It's near, but not exactly affiliated with the Curtis School of Music. Those are slightly different world. This was a thrilling place to go if one wanted to be an opera singer. They ran it like an opera house, so you would have productions, a season of productions, as well as recitals. You would, get cast in roles. You would prepare those roles. You'd have lessons. You'd have coachings, and that was basically your week. Then you'd rehearse and you'd get up on stage and perform. Ironically, after about 2 to 3 years there, realized that, as I've sort of come to say, while I loved to sing, I did not, for me personally, love being an opera singer. There was a distinction there that was important, and ended up being very important. So, after a few years there, sort of felt like my own soul was not getting fed by that particular career path. Now, I will say I have some very good friends who came through there and ended up going on to wonderful international careers. They're out singing in the world, and that is just superb. And they're wonderful people, and they've done wonderful things in that realm. That just wasn't me. And that was a good lesson to learn. It was a hard lesson to learn at the time, because this was the plan. I had met my wife, Melinda, who you all will meet soon, if you haven't gotten a chance to see her when she was here a couple weeks ago. She and I met singing, and she and I were dating since freshman year of college. We got married about a year plus out from graduation. And she had followed me down to Philly, and I was going to go sing, and she was working in a law office and getting a degree in business administration and healthcare administration, so she could transfer from the legal side of healthcare to the administrative side, the programmatic side. So she was doing that. We loved living in Philly, but I was miserable. And so it was at that point that I had what I call my sort of quarter-life crisis, where I said, well, this was the plan. This is not the right plan. What is the plan? Because we don't have a plan now. And so it was in that time of wrestling, of questioning, that I returned, and I say returned because I never really left, but I had also never really dived in to my life of faith. I grew up in the Episcopal Church. There was a wonderful little neighborhood Episcopal church at the top of our street. My mother was a disaffected Roman Catholic and took us there, and was baptized at age 4 or 5, not as an infant. And we grew up there, Church of the Good Shepherd in Wagon, with a wonderful priest who baptized me and also did my wedding, one of those long, wonderful pastoral relationships. So I had had this relationship with the church. I had mentors, our family was involved. But when it comes to sort of developing your own personal life of faith, it was only then, in my, say, early 20s, that I was really saying, like, well, wait a minute. If this is really what we say it is, this world of faith, this religious world, maybe there are some answers here for what I'm looking for about how I should spend my life, what I should do with myself. So I set about to read the Bible. The whole thing, cover to cover. Not exactly the way you should read the Bible, I learned pretty quickly. So I was sort of determined, so I kept at it, but then on the side, I read along, sort of put myself through essentially a sort of Theology 101 curriculum. I picked up books of people I knew, which then through footnotes led me to books of other people that I didn't know, and sort of expanded the intellectual engagement with my faith, while at the same time saying, well, everyone talks about praying, and I've never really, even having grown up in the church, I don't know if I've ever really prayed other than like on Sunday morning when everyone's talking. And I don't think those are necessarily the same thing all the time. So that for me was a time to try to experiment and explore and develop a personal prayer practice of time to relate to God. So I had the intellectual component, I had the spiritual component, and I was getting more involved at the church where we were, Church of the Holy Trinity in Rittenhouse Square. And all of a sudden, I was still singing at this time. I had not quite left school. But I got to a point where my sort of life of study and life of prayer was like, it sounds a little bit lame, but like it was thrilling. It was wonderful. It was like those dry, empty stream beds were now rushing full of water, and so I felt this joy, this excitement, this nourishment from that. And then I had the singing, which for me, again, my experience was sort of life-draining, life-taking. Some of you heard me say sort of an exercise in anxiety. And it got to a point where the disparity was so large that I said, wait a minute, maybe I should pay attention to what's happening here. And so while I turned to my faith as for some answers and some direction, it was just this joyous moment of realizing, well, maybe I'm here. Maybe this is the thing. Maybe the church, maybe being involved in the church, maybe even, dare I say, taking some leadership in the church might be the thing. It was at that point that I made an appointment we had an associate priest at the parish where I was, who was the first priest I had met under 30 years old. So all of a sudden could just barely, and she was, this married lesbian woman. It wasn't like we were sort of the same exact person, but could see in her that this kind of life, was possible. And so just opened that window just a crack to ask the question, I think I might be called to the priesthood. I told my wife this before I told anybody else, which is a good practice. And to her credit, and if she was here, I wouldn't tell you this because she'd be too embarrassed, but she's not here, so I can say it. I said, I think I might want to be a priest. Which was nowhere on the radar screen at this point. And to her credit, she said, without missing a beat, she said, I think you'd be excellent at that. And she knew that I was, a perfectly talented singer, not happy. And for her to offer that affirmation, just that affirmation, not to slap it down, not to say, well, what the hell does that mean? How's that going to work? Who's a priest? I don't even know. Do I have to get divorced? Can you even be married to me? Those kind of things. It wasn't any of that. I think you'd be excellent at that. And with that permission, with that level of affirmation, that's when I started down this path more efficiently, having the conversations, the meetings, etc. Now, there was a funny period of time. She was, as I said, in an MBA program at Villanova in healthcare administration. That's a 2-year program. I was sort of having my crisis in year 1, so we were locked into Philly for an extra year, which was okay because the church makes you jump through a whole bunch of hoops before you can actually sort of get into seminary and start pursuing your degrees and your career. But I didn't feel right being in the school that I knew I was no longer pursuing a career vocally. So I left the school. So I had this gap year, my gap year we'll call it. And you'll probably hear me reference this in sermons because I was a towel boy at a local spa, and I was sort of a tutor/babysitter to a family that we knew. And I was a dog walker for full time, all day long, riding my bike around the city and letting myself into people's apartments and taking the dogs for walks. And I love dogs. I grew up with dogs. My wife's allergic, so we didn't have a dog, so it was kind of a dream job. The pay was okay. Anyways, but it was in this year, and I think that what's so funny about this, and sort of I say this, I'm less than 4 years out from Harvard University, walking dogs and folding towels, and there's a part of me that says, you should be saying to yourself, what did I do wrong? But knowing I was on this path, and continuing into this, where every step along it felt better and better and richer, I almost never, unless there was a really sort of obstreperous dog that was really frustrating me, never really said, this is ridiculous, or you're failed. It felt like a time of transition that I was using richly to sort of soak up all these experiences before I launched into something that more and more felt right. And I can say with great gratitude that feeling has continued through these last years. I went to Harvard Divinity School back up to Massachusetts, where my wife's family is from as well, so that was home base for us. Was there for 3 years, had a wonderful experience there, and then launched into the world of pastoral ministry. I served as a curate and assistant at a really great suburban church in Hingham, Massachusetts, on the south shore of Hingham. If Massachusetts is like this, sort of like in the bicep area there. I was there for 3.5, almost 4 years. We had our 2 kids there, my sons Vincent and Arthur, and it was a fantastic place to start ministry. It was a loving and generous congregation. It had housing for the curate right next to the church, so when we had these 2 young kids, I could run back and forth whenever I was needed to help out. At that point, after about 3 or 4 years, was excited to experience something a little different and to stretch and to grow and challenge myself professionally, but also, say for our family, look, we're from this area. We've lived here our whole lives. Our family is here. We've gotten our feet back under us after having kids. If we're going to try something new, now's the time to do it. Because if we stay here another 5 or 6 years, we're going to be locked in. And that's fine. So, I answered a call to serve as the associate rector at the Chapel of the Cross in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and a lot of good Chapel Hill roots I've learned in my conversations with you guys in the last few weeks. Wonderful town, wonderful church. It's the church that Bishop Peter Lee was rector of before being elected Bishop of Virginia for many years. And it is right next to the university, has a thriving student ministry there, and also has a wonderful choir program. The choir director there is good friends with Kevin. And it was just a wonderful, rich place, but a sort of a grand place and a larger system. You know, you had more staff, you had more things you needed to worry about in terms of the building, you had to raise more money. It was larger than the churches I had ever been a part of. So lived and worked and served there as sort of the number two for, again, 3 or 4 years before saying, okay, I've been ordained for a little while now and really am feeling excited about the opportunity to step into leadership in a new place. And in a place that seems hungry for the kind of things that I may bring to bear. We all, as priests and as people, bring certain gifts, and it's about matching those priests with the community, those gifts with the community and the priests. And here we are. Had some conversations that started opening me up to Christ in St. Luke's as a church, to Norfolk as a community, to this area as a part of the world that I had never been in, and not had any sort of ties to. And I will just say, before I answer it up for questions, have just continually, again, at every step along that process of discernment, and then acceptance, and then preparation, and then arrival, have just been surprised and delighted over and over again by the place, by the church, by the people, and going all the way back to those feelings of the way in which God sort of just gives a little bit of that, enough affirmation for you to say, okay, I'll take the next step. Okay, I'll take the next step. And so here we are. This is where we have come to on that little journey. And I'm excited, given the feelings that I've been getting from it, to see where the next steps lead us. So that's me in a nutshell. I probably left out some details, but we have a mic in the center of the aisle. And if you would like, if you're brave enough, you can come forward. Kevin, are you coming forward, or are you just going to show us where it is? Okay, thank you. Okay, right here. There we go.
Speak into the mic.
It wouldn't be a church meeting without a standing mic that you had to come to. Those of you who've been to conventions and councils. Anyways, so that's a little bit of me. What else do you want to know? What else do you want to know about me? What else do you want to know or ask about the church? Is anyone going to be brave enough to start us off? All right, good. Not me! Don't look at me! Dawn, go ahead.
Hi there. I went to Chapel of the Cross. That's why I'm an Episcopalian, and it was right next to my dorm, so I would just roll out of the bed and go to church. It was wonderful. This is probably a stupid question, but what does priest in charge mean versus rector? Because I was like, what's the difference? I've never seen that in the time I've been in.
That is an excellent question to start with, Dawn. Priest in charge versus rector. I've been called as your priest in charge. This has to do more with the process than with the role. You had Father Wynn here for a long time that had been preparing this community for the future for years. Not just in the building, but in the leadership, in the way in which he was, sort of helping the congregation ask questions of itself. Say, who are we? What are we about? What are we for? Some identity questions. He had been doing that work so well and for so long that when it came time for him to retire, your vestry, in consultation with the diocese, decided to undertake a process that's a little bit faster than the typical search process. The typical search process goes a little something like this. Priest announces retirement. A little while after that, priest retires. An interim priest is brought in, usually another retired priest who comes in and says, okay, I'm going to be here for 6 to 9, maybe 12 months, and we're going to do some house cleaning in here. We're going to sort of see what's gotten a little, sort of dusty, and we're going to clean out some cobwebs. We're going to We're going to do a lot of that self-evaluation and reflection and discernment about our community and who are we. Then we're going to put together a nice glossy profile. We're going to put that out into the world, and the priests out there that are waiting and say, it's kind of like dating. It's like online dating. Like, you come out and you say, like, we're looking. You say, I'm looking. And then you kind of say, well, we seem like we might be a good fit. Let's go on a few dates. And then you decide to get married or not. That is kind of the process. It ends up taking about 12 to 18 months. And I think in the midst of COVID, and Heidi, you can correct me if I'm saying anything incorrect here, but in the midst of COVID, in the midst of a building campaign that is ongoing, in the midst of having done a lot of the work that needed to be done, in the midst of having really talented clergy around to help sort of hold the fort while the main person wasn't there, the decision was made, if we could do this process, which is the diocese vets and has conversations with a number of people, and then submits a slate of candidates to the vestry. And the vestry then, they took this on, has to serve both as vestry and essentially a search committee, interviewing and assessing these candidates and their fit. That then expedites the process. So, it was more like 6 to 8 months than it was like 12 to 18. And that allows for someone like me to come in and hit the ground a little bit earlier in that timeline. And I think, it seems like not allow too much momentum to be lost in the life of the congregation. So that, though, if you do that process, the resulting call is to priest in charge rather than to rector. And the rule is that anywhere within, after a year and up to 3 years, the congregation and that priest in charge mutually discern whether to take that step to rector. So at some point around the 1 year mark, we'll have a conversation with leadership and say, is this working, is this not? And that sort of is the way in which that's why that process is named something different. The different dioceses have slightly different names for it, but that's what they call it here. Although I will say, priest in charge is a pretty banging title, if you ask me. So my friend said, I'm going to put that in my job description, like boss in charge, just to make sure that there's no miscommunication about that. But great question, Don. Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Scott.
What are some of the things that you would like to see happen here while you're serving as priest in charge?
Great question. I'd like to see us finish the building. Buildings, I should say, multiple buildings. If Ray was here, he'd correct me, because they are multiple buildings, and that's part of what's complicated. I'd like to see that because I think that's, I would like to, and I think the second sort of priority I would have is to regather people after so much time apart. And I think whether that's through just, the general sense of, okay, I feel comfortable coming back, and when they do, they feel comfortable and welcomed here, or if it's more intentional about reaching out to folks and sort of giving them an arm around the shoulder or an invitation calls, or, for those of you who know folks who you haven't seen in a little while, saying, hey, did you want to come back to church? We've got this new priest, we've got, things are happening, things are going. Those are the two biggest things that in this year I really would love for us to be working towards. Apart from that, because once we have those things, gosh, the possibilities are just like scintillating, right? When you have the tools of space and a campus that's so centrally located, and you have a school integrated into that, a preschool integrated into that, when you have some of those community groups that we've had to say, sorry, we can't host you for so long, reintegrated into that, then I would love to dream with folks about, okay, what could we do in this place that is formative and important for the community that is gathered here and will have an impact in our neighborhood, in our city, in our region, whatever it may be. Because I do think we have that level of potential in this place. And you mix that with the people we have, and the energy, the spirit, the generosity, the effort that people bring, and that to me seems like a really dynamic combination. So I'd love to see people coming back, and I love to see the buildings finished so that we can get busy, getting busy about the work of God in the world, which is really what we're about. We're not about architecture, and we're not about, just, sort of sitting here waiting for people to come. We say, we're going to do something. We're going to be about something. And I won't pretend 3 weeks in to be able to articulate exactly what that is yet, Scott, but the exciting thing for me, what I would like to see, is people coming together with that same level of spirit and excitement for the future. And one of the things as I was discerning that was one of the deciding factors to me is that this seems like a place that is investing literally and figuratively into its future. And not every church is doing that. There are a lot of other churches for whom fear of the future is the predominant feeling. And so that was exciting for me to say, if we can get together at that level, then we're really going to be cooking. Thank you. Others? Miriam, you can ask a question?
Sorry, I really appreciate you come today because I went to the dinner last week and last Sunday. It was such a wonderful revelation to meet you, greet you, and hear what your story is powerful.
Thanks,
It
Miriam.
really is.
Thank you.
And I just look at this and go, Lord, thank you for sending us this man. Thank you. I recommend going to the dinner because it's fun, meeting him and talking to him and just meeting people. I met people I've never really talked to before, so give it a try.
Thank you, Miriam. Excellent. Thank you.
Right, go to Robin and
Good. Monday night, that's right. Tomorrow night. I think we have a couple spaces left for Robin and Ed if you want to grab them afterwards. Carl.
Have you talked with Bishop Susan, and has she given you any of her hopes for the parish?
Yes, I've had a couple of conversations with Bishop Susan, who is wonderful, a real prayerful, spiritually grounded bishop, which is an excellent thing to be if you're a bishop, in my opinion. And I've served with two excellent bishops in my ordained career. Yes, Bishop Susan and I have talked about how Christ in St. Luke's inhabits its role as leader in this diocese specifically, and how we are a gathering place for a diocese which, I don't have all the skeletons out of the closet yet, but has felt disparate at times. Because I think there is such a geographic diversity, a socioeconomic diversity, a racial diversity across the Episcopal Diocese of Southern Virginia, even just within a relatively small area. How do we serve as a gathering place, a place that people, that priests and clergy and other congregations feel welcome and feel like they have some participation in and ownership in? So that conversation has happened, and we are starting to think together about what exactly that means. And I mean, it has the grandness that makes one feel like, oh, this is a really beautiful church. But I also think that it has the spirit of connectivity and welcome, even in the name, right? It's a combined parish, even 100 years ago. So it has connections and experience with integrating others from outside the community into the community in a really great way. So as we continue to function in that leadership role, how do we grow into it even more and use it and utilize our building, our location, our particular skills and talents and abilities to call this diocese together so that it does feel a little more whole? And so people I drive through here, Emporia, feel the same as they do in Virginia Beach about they are a part of something together. And I think what that's going to do for us is give us some wonderful opportunities to ask some questions about what it means to be an Episcopal church, a lower C Catholic church in the sense of having connections to other churches and parishes around, and not every tub on its own bottom kind of thing. I'm from New England, right, where the Congregationalists rule today, and the Congregationalists split into the Unitarians, and every church sort of is independent, which they greatly value, but some of my colleagues in those denominations said, gosh, how cool it is to have colleagues, to have meetings where you get together with folks, and it's not just about you, it is about something larger. And that's a slightly different, what I would say, sort of ecclesiology, understanding of what the church and how the church functions. So that's another component layered on top of all the excitement within the community, the expectations, the hopes, the responsibility that will come with being fully the kind of community I think we can be. Thanks, Carl. Priscilla. Go on, go all the way up, yeah.
I know, I wanted to just yell back there. First of all, thank you for a wonderful sermon. I'd never connected the 2 3s, and so that was very helpful. Thank you.
Good.
I don't know that everybody is aware how close we are to completing our projects, and perhaps they'd like to hear more about it, or when we're going to be able to go inside and see some things.
I don't know if we're able to duck in there. I think it's safe enough. You might be able, if you're interested, you might be able to take a peek. We are getting very close to finishing the Parish house. So the Parish house running parallel here to Olney Street, we're looking at June to be in there. And believe me, no one wants that more than your staff, who are currently working everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So we have our chapel office, we have our tower office, we have our narthex office. So those are our offices at the moment. We are looking very much to regathering into this new space. I won't spend time now rehashing the whole plan, only suffice to say it seems like it's going to be quite glorious. The ceilings are taller. We're going to have, sort of all sorts of new improvements. That space should be highly functional, highly welcoming, and developed. That June, so we're within, May today? So we've got, within a couple months of finishing that off. The tricky part, as I'm sure if you've been paying attention you know, is the connector between the Parish house and Lloyd Hall and that building. That's new construction, which always takes a little bit longer than just renovating, and highly complex and complicated, more so than we had even thought when we engaged in this project. But it's going to be critically important, first of all, because on that first floor, that area is going to serve as the welcome area. It's going to be clear, as I understand it, it wasn't always clear what door you were supposed to come in when you came to church here. Maybe to come to church, but like to go to meet with someone, you're like, is this the door? Is this the door? And you walk half a mile around the block trying to look for how to get in. It'll be very clear where to enter. But that is befitting our sort of spirit of welcome and hospitality here in the church. That'll also be the sort of the drop-off area where the preschool kids come in. It will also have an elevator. And so for those who have a difficult time with stairs, they will not have to face the treacherous stairs that are in the back corners of the church to get to the second floor, where the offices will be, where a brand new choir rehearsal room will be, and where there'll be sort of various other things, meeting rooms and things up there as well. So the connector is coming along. There were a number of sort of things we were tripping over for a while there, but it seems like, I was here last week, they were pouring another layer of concrete, and once we sort of reach ground level, we'll be able to start building, and you'll see that part coming in. Meanwhile, work is ongoing in Lloyd Hall, upstairs and downstairs. And that continues to go along too. It's coming along apace, but we can't really open that until the connector is open, because there won't really be a safe access point or a way to get in there. So for those two components, and we have a meeting in a couple of days, but the steering committee does, but as of our last meeting, just a couple weeks ago, we're looking at the end of August for that. So the hope, the prayer, is that by the fall we can be moving back into our buildings fully. The preschool, the Williams School, some of you may be wondering, they had made the decision because they were in a time of transition as well with a new head of school who wanted to be the one to pick the new head of the preschool, who then would need to hire the teachers to get the students to do the do. They elected of their own accord to push till January for a start. So we may have that space open and available before they're even in there using it, and I think it's just another way in which we've been working hard and been successful in opening up and keeping open really strong lines of communication between the parish and the school, because we're going to be roommates. And as everybody who's had a roommate knows, communication is key. So they're looking to get in January and start their new sort of cohort of students and teachers, and we should be, or looking to be done by the end of the summer with those major things. Now, I say that, and you hear that, and we all know that in the context of these building projects, things come up. There may be other things that come up. But we're very hopeful because of the stage we've been able to reach with the parish house. We're really now, they're just putting the drywall on the walls, and they got to sweep up and refinish the floors and things like that. But we're moving into the cosmetic phase. The structural phase is still somewhat ongoing behind me. But progress is being made, and we're very, very hopeful in that regard. So if you wanted to peek in there, you could. The flower room, for example, before Easter, they needed somewhere to store those, thousands of flowers, right? They used one of the rooms in there. So some of those rooms are now accessible to us, and you're not going to sort of fall to your death if you go walking through those doors over there. Don't say that. We do not hold any liable responsibility. I'm not supposed to say something like that to anybody who would go in there and get injured, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, Judy's looking at me like, don't say things like that. It's exactly what will happen. Questions, more questions. So you'll be hearing more about the campaign. Come on up, Asa. You'll be hearing more about the campaign in the coming weeks and months. We'll hope to show you more. We'll hope to be able to open up the doors to you, and we'll hope to be able to talk with you also about our plans for the Lychgate Garden as well. Yes?
Hi, my name is Asa. I've been here for about 10, 11 years now. One of the things that drew me to this church, and I was reminded of it this morning listening to, as we read Revelations, and they talked about the four noble creatures, which are sitting right behind us in that red book.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that have always drawn me to this church is the spirituality.
Yeah.
We've been lucky, I guess they're all gone now, but we used to have some really very profound Jungian analysts that were also Episcopal priests.
Wow.
Mother Sue, bless her heart,
Sure.
is one that I'm thinking of right
Yeah.
now. But once again, just welcome. It was a wonderful sermon. And the spirituality, besides all this temporal stuff, is really, really important.
Yes.
And we do a good job of it.
Yes.
So thank you.
No, I think you're exactly right. And that, again, that shines through. And again, your search committee did a wonderful job communicating that, and the vestry as well, because they were my main point of contact. What I've been thrilled with and just excited by is this is a place that is not just a building, right? The building is stunning, right? It's stunning. And it's got a heart and a faith big enough to fill this space, right? It has a vitality. You can go see, you don't even make you sit there if you want, but yes, thinking about and dreaming about the ways in which we continue to cultivate and form ourselves and others spiritually is practically what we should be about. And there'll be different people who engage with that differently, and so we'll have different sorts of offerings. But I'm looking very much to we've got a great staff team in place, and I'm looking forward to building up my contacts and networks and things like that so that I can invite people in and say, hey, that was awesome. Could you bring that to Christ in St. Luke's? I think they'd really like that. Or thinking together about what are the kind of classes or discussion groups or book groups or things or prayer groups that we want to bring back or to start. One of the things that, again, I've used this metaphor with some of you, so forgive me, but the last couple years have been like my boys who are young. They don't do this so much anymore, but they certainly do sometimes. They would build a tower of blocks, right? And then inevitably, for whatever reason or no reason at all, the tower would be destroyed and knocked to the ground. Our regular rhythms of church life have been that tower now, that are it's now a pile of blocks on the ground. And we get to choose. One of the great opportunities then is we get to choose which blocks we pick up and put back. And we get to choose, are we building the same tower? Are we building a slightly different tower? Are we building a plane? Are we, whatever we want to build, we're going to get to choose that together about what are the things that we miss, that we want and need back. What are some things we always wanted to try but never could quite sort of integrate because the train was already running on the tracks? And what are some new things we sort of discover together to say, what if we tried this? So all of that, I think, will be particularly impactful around issues of, our adult formation, our spiritual formation, as well as what I know Kathy's planning to do for the youth and the kids, which is already pretty exciting. So it's a great point. Thanks for reminding us of that, too. Others? Yeah? Come on up, Antonella. Take your time.
Good morning, Father. Thank you for being here. I noticed this morning, I'm a numbers cruncher, and I noticed this morning there were about 325 people or so in church during liturgy, between the pews and the choir, yourself, people in the back, and so on. And I should give you a disclaimer here. I'm a Harlem native, New York, and I was born in the 1940s into a rat and roach infested tenement community. So my heart, my preference has always been for the poor. And what I noticed is, of those 325 people, there were about 12 people of color. African Americans, Latino, Latinx, and Latino, and also South Asians.
Yeah.
That comes out to a pretty small percentage, about 3.5 to 4%.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Pew statistics on the number of people who attend liturgies vis-a-vis the official church membership of that given parish, if there were 225 people this morning here, that means that the total membership of C. Christ in St. Luke's is about 2,100 or somewhere in that range. And which means if there were 12 people here of color this morning, there's not even 75 in the entire official congregation.
Yeah.
And to me, that is something that should change. Because if you want to invigorate this church, if you want to bring life into this church, if you want this church to really come alive and sparkle, you should bring minorities in. I understand that historically, the Episcopal Church, when I was growing up, was often called the Church of the Anglo-Saxon Protestants.
Right.
So, and I understand it may still be a little like that.
Yeah.
But it can change.
Yeah.
Because, after all, the angel Gabriel said to Mary, "For with God, nothing is impossible." In Luke 1:37.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see those changes here. Again, a disclaimer, I'm a professor, a university professor of English at Norfolk State University. So I support every effort to me, my students are scholars.
Yeah.
And because as a trans woman, I no longer have a family, my students are my chosen family.
No.
So I want to see more minority representation and participation. And I think this church will explode. If you want this church to be a center of spiritual life in this area, the way to do it is to bring more minorities in.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point, and I appreciate that. It's if we want this place to explode, if we want this place to be spiritually vital, it should reflect the community within which it is situated, right? I mean, in the real gift of a city like Norfolk is that it has that diversity. It has that diversity of race and of class and of age and of gender and of sexual orientation. And I think absolutely we should continue and figure out ways to be welcoming and inviting to those who may be different and for whom this is a different sort of worship experience than they're used to. And how do we strengthen those relationships with organizations, with our neighborhood, with the people out there, so that they feel comfortable coming into this place. And that when they are here, they are welcomed as a member of Christ's body. I think that's an excellent point, and I absolutely agree with that as an effort.
May I offer one more suggestion?
Sure, please.
As a young boy, when I was a boy, on the streets of New York, I went to a Catholic prep school, and I did a lot of fundraising because of my disability. I have cerebral palsy. I couldn't do what you did, which was sports.
Yeah.
So I did fundraising, and I was very successful because I went through the Lower East Side where my school was, and I knocked on hundreds of doors.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm telling you this works is because the community that I canvassed in that era was almost predominantly Jewish.
Right.
And those beautiful Jewish people invited me in to their homes for that quintessential New York dessert, coffee and cake. And so we got to meet each other. And I had donations of $2 to $5 from hundreds of people who were so kind to me. But they were Jewish, giving to a young Catholic boy to raise funds. And the reason they were doing that was because they saw, I didn't understand this at the time, but I learned it later on. They were alone, and the Catholic Church, my school, was reaching out to help them, not to proselytize, but to treat them as members of the community. And they appreciated that.
Yeah.
And
that's a wonderful story.
So you knock on doors, you talk to people who may not be open to your way of life, but you become a community.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think that's the goal. No, thank you, Reginald. I appreciate that. No, that is the goal. And how do we reach out? How do we knock on those doors, literally or figuratively, to let people know of this place? I mean, I think that's the challenge when you've got a big, imposing fortress-like structure, right, that is glorious and also a little bit intimidating. How can we be known as much for the heart of our community as we are for the tower, right? So that people do feel like, whether they're next door in Pelham Place, or whether they're behind me in the Ghent, or over there in the Ghent Mansion or something like that, that they feel like this is my home, and I am welcome here, and I am valued here, whether they come to church here or not. And that's another point I think you were saying. It's like, it's not just about trying to get members in the pews. It's about how we are reaching out and integrating our community into the larger and broader community around us. I hope and I pray that that will bring some more people into the doors, but ultimately it will bring us out of our doors more than it brings people in. And that, I think, will be, that'll stretch us, it'll push us, and it'll be a wonderful thing. All right, well, I know we're probably all hungry for lunch, so let's close. But in the meantime, I'm available to you if you need to get in touch, and just want to thank you again. I had Nora drew a picture of me today while I was preaching. So little Nora and her family have only been coming for 3 or 4 months, a biracial family, and they are here and sort of exploring us. This sort of encapsulates the feeling I've had since I've started here, which is one of just being seen and welcomed and known in a wonderful way that has, I think, allowed me to feel just completely at ease, and I hope has been enjoyable for you as well. But in the meantime, I wanted to thank Nora, but I also want to thank you all for this and for all the ways you've been welcoming to me and will be to my family as well. So thank you guys very, very much.